Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Poetry for Life webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Eleanor Billington, and I'm the Program Manager for Literature and Arts Education. And before I introduce my colleagues, who are also going to be presenting, I want to address a few housekeeping rules. Our PowerPoint presentation today will be followed by a brief Q&A. You can submit questions at any time on your screen, and we'll be using the Q&A box below the PowerPoint presentation. We will do our best to address as many questions as we can during the time we have. Please remember not to use the raise hand button that's at the top of your screen in the middle there. Also note that you'll be muted and you'll only be able to hear the presenters. The webinar will be archived on both the poetryoutloud.org and arts.gov websites in just a couple days for your reference. Okay, so we'll introduce our speakers to get us going. Beth Bienvenu is the Director of Accessibility at the National Endowment for the Arts. Beth, do you mind just saying a couple words about your portfolio and introducing yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Eleanor. I'm really happy to be here. Like Eleanor said, I'm the Director of Accessibility here at the NEA. I work to make the arts accessible for people with disabilities, as well as older adults, veterans, and people living in institutional settings. And I work very closely with the state arts agencies in several capacities, including working with the accessibility coordinators to help ensure accessibility for people with disabilities, and also working with the communities of practice in arts, health, and aging, which I'll talk about in a few minutes.
Thank you, Beth. Gary Glazner is the Director of Poetry for Life. He's also the founder of that program. Gary is on the line with us, of course. Gary, do you mind just introducing yourself and saying hello to everyone?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Gary. From Missouri, we have Ginny Saunders. Ginny is the Poetry Out Loud coordinator in Missouri. Ginny, please say hello.
Hello, this is Jenny Saunders, and I'm the Missouri Arts Council's Poetry Out Loud coordinator and also the ADA coordinator.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you to everybody who's presenting today. All right, so before we get started with the meat of our presentation, I'm going to give everyone a little bit of an overview about the Poetry Out Loud program. In 2005, the National Endowment for the Arts and the Poetry Foundation joined together with 53 state and jurisdictional arts agencies to create Poetry Out Loud, a program that encourages the nation's youth to learn about great poetry through study, memorization, and performance. As many of you on the line know, students choose poems from an anthology of over 900 selections, and they recite them in competition. Since the program began, more than 3.3 million students, 12,000 high schools, and 50,000 teachers have participated in Poetry Out Loud. In addition, more than $1 million in prizes and school stipends have been awarded to state and national finalists. We are really, really proud of the program's growth in terms of the numbers, but we're also especially excited by the way that Poetry Out Loud has become a staple in many schools and communities, and it has inspired partnerships such as Poetry for Life. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Beth to talk a little bit about communities of practice.
Thank you, Eleanor. The NEA has been working with the National Center for Creative Aging for the past several years on their communities of practice in arts, health, and aging, otherwise known as the ENGAGE initiative. We've had, over the years, we've worked with 40 states to participate in this project, working to support arts programs for older adults throughout their states. These have included partnerships with other state agencies on aging, new grant initiatives, arts learning programs, and training for arts organizations across the states. And we've been thrilled with the type of work they've been doing and the success that they've had in building the field of creative aging. One project that we're doing right now with NCCA is developing a website to kind of embed this program and give the states an opportunity to communicate with their constituents and people across the country about what they're doing for creative aging. And each state will have its own page, and we're hoping to launch it in May. So we hope that you're working with your web developers and your other folks to develop these pages, these templates, and be sure to include any activities that you're doing with Poetry for Life so you can advertise this wonderful program. So I've been excited to work with all of you on this, and I think now we can go ahead and turn it over to Gary, who will talk more about the Poetry for Life program. Gary?
So good afternoon. Thanks everyone for being here. Beth, Eleanor, Ginny, thanks so much for your support. A special thanks to Lauren Tuzolino, the accessibility specialist with the NEA, for all of her hard work in putting the webinar together. I want to thank all the Poetry Out Loud and Communities of Practice people at the state arts agencies for joining us today, and a big thanks to all the states that have already participated. I also want to thank Steve Young and the Poetry Foundation. Steve and I have worked closely on Poetry for Life, and he's helped plan the project from the beginning. So today, I'm going to share some stories and poems of the students and elders that we've had the honor of working with, and I'll share our goals and our hopes, and we're going to walk through how you can help your schools, teachers, students get involved with Poetry for Life. Before we begin talking about Poetry for Life, I want to share with you how I got started using poetry with people living with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia. In 1997, I received a small grant to give a series of workshops at an adult daycare center in Northern California. There was no instruction on what to do, just to use poetry. I hit on the idea of using classic poems that people might have learned as children. My moment of inspiration and the story that I love to share, there was a man in the group. His head was down. He wasn't participating, seemingly unaware of his surroundings. And I said the Longfellow poem. I shot an arrow into the air, and his eyes popped open. He said, "It fell to earth, I knew not where." Suddenly, he was back with us and able to participate, and I was hooked. It showed me how powerful those poems could be, how useful classic poetry could be with this community. Since that time, I've created the Alzheimer's Poetry Project, and we've done programming in 26 states and internationally in Australia, Canada, England, Germany, Poland, and South Korea. In 2013, I had the idea of bringing students participating in Poetry Out Loud to work with elders and people living with memory loss. I began by talking with Steve Young about the idea and looking at what had worked in the early days of the formation of Poetry Out Loud. Steve was supportive and helped plan the pilot project, and the Poetry Foundation has supported the pilot project since its inception. We've now done programming in 9 states. The pilot project has worked with 26 schools, 450 students, in 94 poetry workshops, and we've served 844 older adults, including those living with memory loss. Some schools have continued to go on the poetry field trips beyond the initial training. One example is Cleveland Central High in Cleveland, Mississippi, and I'm thrilled to report that they've continued to go to the local hospital on a monthly basis and are now expanding the program to include other schools in the area. Our goal is to have a minimum of 10% of the 315,000 students who take part in Poetry Out Loud to participate in Poetry for Life. This would bring over 30,000 students to work with older adults. It would change the scope of creative aging volunteers in the U.S. I want to share with you the writing of one of the students on his experience. This is Cody Tulip of Durand High in Durand, Wisconsin. And Cody writes, "I have to admit, coming into today, I did not expect much from this workshop. I work with the elderly on a daily basis due to my after-school job as a nursing assistant. Upon entering the nursing home, I recognized some people I know, either from my job or due to the fact that I live in a tiny rural town in Wisconsin. A woman named Dorothy especially moved me. Her Alzheimer's is so significant, she could not remember her name, and she thought I was one of her grandchildren. At first, she did not want to partake in the poetry activities. But once we began to do the rhythmic poems by Emily Dickinson, her face was filled with happiness, and she gripped my hands with such force, I almost had to retreat my hand. It was at this moment I was shown the absolute power poetry has over Alzheimer's. So that's Cody. I don't think I could have asked for a stronger endorsement if I had asked him to write the essence of this work than when he writes, I was shown the absolute power poetry has over Alzheimer's. So what is creative aging? Creative aging is the practice of engaging older adults, 55 plus, in participatory arts programs with a focus on the social engagement and skills mastery. As we heard from Beth, the National Center for Creative Aging, who works with the NEA on communities of practice, is dedicated to fostering an understanding of the vital relationship between creative expression and healthy aging, and to developing programs that build on this understanding. And we're excited that NCCA is helping us with Poetry for Life. So creative aging is about social engagement, mastering skills, using creative expression, all with the goals of healthy aging and improving your quality of life. Some of the research that supports using arts with the elders begins with this 2006 study by Dr. Gene Cohen, which was sponsored by the NEA, entitled Creativity and Aging Study, the Impact of Professionally Conducted Cultural Programs on Older Adults. At the end of the webinar, there's links to all the studies that I'm going to mention in this talk. One highlight from the study was these results point to true health promotion and disease prevention effects. The study also stated these community-based cultural programs for older adults appear to be reducing the risk factors that drive the need for long-term care. So that leads us to our next slide and the aging of America and the need for arts programs. We all know about the increase in the elderly as the baby boomer generation ages. So here are a few of those statistics that show that increase. As we look at these sobering statistics, I can report from a recent survey among the most popular songs for baby boomers are Jailhouse Rock by Elvis Presley, That'll Be the Day, Buddy Holly and the Crickets, What I Say, Ray Charles, I Want to Hold Your Hand, The Beatles, and my favorite, The Twist by Chubby Checker. On a side note, I'm happy to report that I was the twist champion in second grade at PS 124 in Staten Island, New York. I'm sure you have your own list of favorite songs, and hopefully you are desk dancing to them now. So what's the connection with poetry and dementia? So while not all the people we work with will have dementia, many of the elders we work with will have some memory loss. In our work with the Alzheimer's Poetry Project, there are a few studies I point to that support using poetry with people living with dementia and elderly in general. A 2004 study done in Germany showed that the heart rate and pulse were lowered during poetry recitation, indicating a reduction in stress. A 2007 study done at the University of Liverpool in England showed increased synaptic activity in the language centers of the brain in response to a poetry technique that Shakespeare made use of. And that one's called Shakespeare's brain. So we have a lowering of stress and an increase in the activity in the language centers of the brain in response to poetry. What we see anecdotally is people becoming more social, laughing, expressing joy. And there's another study done in England, poetry written by people given a diagnosis of dementia, and it found that there's significant emotional and psychological benefit gained from being able to access the creative part of one's identity. We're also doing our own research and have studies published in the International Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, the Gerontologist, and Dementia. All of these are peer-reviewed journals, and each of the papers we have published has shown strong results. I'm excited to say that Poetry for Life has a research component. We have the students take a survey before and after the poetry workshop. We're looking to see if they change their attitudes toward the elderly and people living with dementia by observing them engaged in poetry. We based this work on the study we did with medical students that was published in the International Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, and it will greatly expand the number of people included in that project. Again, all the links to these papers are at the end of the webinar, or just ask, and I'm happy to send you the PDF information package that's based on the webinar. So the benefits of Poetry for Life. Among the benefits are the opportunity to reinforce what the students have learned in Poetry Out Loud and a chance to try the skills outside of the classroom in a real-world setting. In talking with Amber Wolf, the teacher in Mississippi who has continued Poetry for Life for over 2 years on a monthly basis, she mentioned how the program helps to build empathy. Wolf writes, "I really love my students, and I feel like me and my students have become more connected through this program." She goes on to say, "Empathy is not a natural occurrence in our brain. It is something that has to be taught. I've noticed that my students, even though they're already kind and loving children, they become significantly more empathetic through this program. They become more open-minded individuals." And she closes by saying, "One of the students is a shy kid, and he has become more willing to share his emotions with others, which is something I did not see happening. I did not expect that occurrence, and it's been beautiful." So now we're going to hear from Virginia Saunders of the Missouri Arts Council on her experience with Poetry for Life. And I should mention what a wonderful partner Virginia has been. She has a real passion and a skill for building community and bringing people together. One example is each year with Poetry Out Loud, she has the legislators write proclamations for the students and host a lunch so that they can meet each other and get to know each other. So here's Virginia.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you for this opportunity. Gary and I have done several Poetry for Life projects together. The last project was a 4-city tour, conducting 8 workshops in 4 days. We traveled north, south, east, and west. The tour made it possible through a partnership with the MC5 Missouri Coalition Celebrating Care Continuum Change. This is a group dedicated to changing the culture of aging across Missouri, the Alzheimer's Association, and the Missouri Arts Council. The 4-city tours, Missouri had over 375 participants. The morning workshop were targeted to professional caregivers. The afternoon session targeted the Poetry for Life project, which included students, family members, caregivers, and in each location we had different stages of Alzheimer's patients and others with cognitive disorders, including traumatic brain injuries. Over the past 2 years, we have had several high schools involved in the Poetry for Life project. They have included inner-city public schools, college prep high schools, private schools, small-town schools, suburban schools, and homeschool groups. The presentation settings have varied from very institutionalized care facilities to upscale care centers in public settings. Gary's style of teaching lends itself to both the elders and the students. One example comes to mind. Gary was working with a homeschool group and asked a student what his hobby was. The student replied, "Making things out of duct tape." Gary was undaunted. A roll of duct tape was produced, and Gary had the student make an arrow out of the tape and had him use a plastic coat hanger for a bow. The Arrow in the Song by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was the poem. You can guess what happened next. I shot an arrow into the air. It fell to earth, I know not where. For so swiftly it flew the sight, could not follow it in its flight. The student pretended to be the arrow and flew around the room and landed on the floor. Both students and elders dealing with Alzheimer's really got into it, and before long, the room was filled with laughter. It never ceases to amaze me how soon the students, or as Gary likes to call them, young knowledge seekers, lose their apprehensions about working with the elders, or on the other hand, the smiles and laughs that come from the elders. Working with the Poetry for Life program has given me a better understanding of the potential we have with working with those with memory loss and how students can be a powerful resource when working with that community. Poetry for Life is a companion and complementary add-on to Poetry Out Loud. I see the students develop confidence, lose the discomfort of public speaking, and the joy of giving of themselves. Each group has come away with a better understanding in what they can do to improve the life of someone else and how much better they feel about helping others. My goal for 2017 is to add 10 additional schools to the program. I close this with this comment from the student that attended a Poetry for Life workshop. I had no clue what to expect in this class. I put class in quotes because it was definitely a different feel like a class, which was a good thing. I learned a lot. I guess I thought I'd be sitting through a lecture on why poetry can help Alzheimer's patients. But instead, my friends and I were called upon to talk about our hobbies, places we have been, and things we have liked in front of the seniors. Our teachers started to make poetry and songs of the things we had said. Everyone helped out. At the beginning, the seniors weren't talking much, but as we had the chance to engage them with fun activities, they began to speak up. Some of them started telling us about their past experience, which was really cool considering some of them were Alzheimer's patients. I laughed a lot, and so did everyone else. It was so much better than I had expected, and I had a great time. This group of students will be developing an outreach program for seniors with the guidance of some dedicated parents. The Missouri Arts Council is proud of its accomplishments through the Poetry Out Loud and the Poetry for Life projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. So these are a couple of statements from our very first session that took place in North Carolina. Emily Lemoyne writes about the benefits to students, including seeing the joy and excitement that they can bring to people, and she expressed how she wants to do the project every year. Banu Vandieris, the past program director for North Carolina Arts, wrote, "It was an incredible experience watching the elders respond to the youth and the youth being fed by their responses." So how do we participate in Poetry for Life? We are asking that you help in outreach to the teachers. We'll work with you to add outreach text as you communicate with the teachers throughout the year. We'll be using a template that we've developed with the Missouri Arts Council, and we can custom design this for each of the state arts agencies depending on your needs. So what are the action steps? Let us know you want to participate, and we will work with you to develop that text to invite the teachers and schools to take part. Teachers will receive Poetry for Life support, including live classroom webinars to plan the field trips to work with elders. So depending on when in the Poetry Out Loud schedule the field trip takes place, it can be used in many different ways. If it's in the fall, you can use it to help recruit students to Poetry Out Loud. As the season progresses in the late winter and into January through March, you can use it as an opportunity for the students to go out and prepare to participate in the contest. And after the contest is over, it can be used to give another chance to recite the poems and use the skills the students have learned. One of the things we've heard so many times is that the students work so hard on the poem, it's wonderful to give them a chance to use it again. So the school participation breaks down into two main models. The first is the workshop model, and the second is the service learning model. The workshops typically take place in one day, but it can be adjusted to fit the school's needs and take place over several days. It breaks down into three components: the introduction, the poetry field trip, and student writing. Poetry for Life will support the introduction workshop with a live webinar with the classroom. These webinars will be done by myself and the 8 teaching artists that I work with on the Alzheimer's Poetry Project. They get an overview of Alzheimer's Poetry Project methods and techniques. They learn how to build a poetry program for older adults. They learn some of the biology of the basics of Alzheimer's and related dementia. And they get help in planning for the field trip. And typically this introduction workshop is an hour in length. So the poetry field trip, we will provide the teachers with a script to help them contact their local assisted living, adult daycare, or senior centers to help them facilitate booking the field trip. The teachers and students travel to the local centers. The students perform poetry with the older adults using Alzheimer's Poetry Project methods and techniques. They recite their poems from Poetry Out Loud, and typically the poetry field trip takes an hour plus travel time. The third component is the student writing. So following the field trip, the students write about their experiences. Students may write in a prose style, a who, what, where, when, why, journalistic type piece like we heard Jenny read from Caden in Missouri, and the students may create poems. We found that the students strongly value the opportunity to write about their experience. This may also enhance the Poetry Out Loud curriculum, and many schools with established programs are looking to build on Poetry Out Loud and include opportunities for the students to write. So here's a poem that was written by Jalen Bell, the 2014 Arkansas State Champion, and he wrote this: "Minds like locked boxes presented in the round. I used language like keys, and love is what I found. Love for the now and for history, and the love was unlocked with the key of poetry." The second model is the service learning model. We typically start with the workshop and then build on that experience. Service learning provides the students with a longer period of time and more opportunity to interact with the older adults. Poetry for Life works with the students and teachers to custom design a service learning program to fit the school and the students' needs. We've had many different levels of commitment, but we've had an example as an 8-week project at Tupelo High in Mississippi, and we're now in the middle of a year-long project we're doing with Brooklyn Tech. In the service learning project, one of the techniques that we use is for the students to take an oral history from the adult, the older adult. Once they record the oral history and transcribe it, we work with them to shape the oral history into a poem. Here's an example of an oral history poem from Jose Mondragon, who we worked with in Santa Fe, New Mexico. This is Jose's poem on his experience of being buried alive in a copper mine. Copper mine. The rope was like a rope you would tie a horse with, about as thick as a quarter, to pull you up or down out of the mine. The whole thing came sliding down. I put my hands against the board. Oh God, that is all I say. They tell me I don't see myself. I was in a little hole about as big as my body, in the mine, in the chute. I held my breath. I passed out. They tell me I don't see myself. A bunch of water, blue copper mining water. It was running all around, dirt coming down the shaft. The board came down. I was standing to one side, looking up to the top, looking up to my partner. I could see his light. The dirt came down like snow. I stuck my head underneath the board. They put me on a stretcher. They brought me up the shaft. They had one little cage. It could only hold 2 men. They put me in the cage, standing straight up on the stretcher. I passed out. They took me to the hospital. They put me in the hospital freezer like I was dead. I said, God help me. They tell me I never saw myself. So the benefits of the service learning include enriching the learning experience, teaching civic responsibility. It helps to strengthen communities. It builds empathy. It's a deepening of the experience of performing poetry and reinforces the practical uses of recitation skills. It gives the students an increased sense of social development and of the aging process, increased awareness of career opportunities in the healthcare field, meaningful involvement in the local community, and interaction with people of diverse ages, cultures, and lifestyles. Here's one last poem by Heidi Hankins, who participated in Charleston, Mississippi, and she writes about her experience shaking youthful hands with wrinkled hands, knowing that one day my hair will be as white as theirs. One day I might need young smiles with mouth full of teeth to smile at me, an extra boost to make me smile. Shaking youthful hands with wrinkled hands is what changed my life. And now we are towards the end and have a chance to have some question and answers.
Hi, Gary. Thank you so much, and thank you, Jenny, too. So as Gary just mentioned, we have up on the screen the Poetry for Life resources. So these are things that are available if you're interested in participating. And there's more information at the website that's right up on the screen there. So we have time for questions. If you'd like to submit them, again, you can use the Q&A box that's on your screen there. And those questions will come to us, and we can field them. So to start us off, I wanted to ask Gary and Jenny a little bit about what it's like to get teachers involved in this program, because we know that teachers have a lot on their plates. They're really busy. So I'm curious, either Jenny or Gary, both of you guys, what has it been like to recruit teachers, and what has the response been from the teachers who have participated?
Well, I can answer first, and then we can hear from Jenny. So far, the response has been really great. I mean, the teachers are self-selected, so they're, already up for taking a field trip. It's been pretty easy to get them involved, and we anticipate being able to support them with the live webinars in the classroom will be really effective. And we have done this with other schools in the pilot project to see, how it works if there's not a teaching artist live in the room with them, and it's worked really well.
What I find is the teachers that are very excited about poetry out loud are not opposed to having an additional element added to it. The students are mostly apprehensive at the very beginning, but after you talk to them and you talk through it and they find out actually what they're going to be doing, they kind of get excited about it. Most of the teachers that I've worked with are teachers that have been in the Poetry Out Loud program for several years. So there's not any apprehension about moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Gary. We have a couple questions that, like I said, we'll go through and answer as many as we can with the time we have. So there's a question about structure and how this is implemented. One of our participants wants to know, are POL coordinators the ones who are implementing and managing Poetry for Life, or is it the creative aging staff member, or do some SAAs hire a Poetry for Life coordinator, or do you work with an outside person to manage this aspect of your POL program?
So I think that all of those are possibilities, and one of the side benefits of this webinar is to really bring together the Poetry Out Loud coordinators and the people at the state arts agencies that are working on communities of practice, because I don't think there's been that much crossover at this point. And so that would really be what the state arts agency sees as the best, person to interact, to manage it, is whether it comes from Poetry Out Loud, or it could come from community of engagement, or it could be a combination of people working on it together. Certainly, there's the potential, as some state arts agencies do hire outside Poetry Out Loud coordinators, that as the project grows and develops, that could be a possibility as well. And we've also structured it so there can be minimal, depending on the state arts agency's level of commitment, they can just be helping us to reach out to teachers and getting them involved, or they can be more involved. For instance, Arkansas uses it as a way to teach poetry out loud teachers, and brings me in to give a talk along with their poetry out loud coordinator. Mississippi has used it extensively on a 3-month project throughout the state with 3 different cities. So there's lots of different ways to structure that, and we want to make it work for you.
Thank you, Gary.
I guess I have an advantage because I am both the communities practice person and the Poetry Out Loud coordinator. And what I have found is working with different outside groups is a great talking point. This MC5 group in Missouri has been very helpful in facilitating and moving forward with getting Poetry for Life out within the public.
Thank you, Ginny. Thank you, Gary. We have another question about the resources that are required. So what does the commitment look like from the states, and what are the resources required from the states in order to implement Poetry for Life?
So again, it can be really a pretty wide range of level of commitment. One of the things that Jenny and I have worked on is to look at the way that Missouri communicates with the teachers throughout the year. So that's the first point, is just we would add language to those email blasts that you're sending out to let teachers know about it. And then, so that resource would just be adding to that communication. And then beyond that, people, like I mentioned before, have different levels of commitment where they really want to, to fund projects or to, to expand it. And so that's something that we can work with you for each state to really make this work for your needs and the level of commitment you're able to give to it.
Thank you, Gary. So it sounds like you all are very flexible, and again, you're doing what works for the state and for that particular POL program, which is really wonderful. We have a specific question about teachers and teacher preference. The question is, have you found that teachers request the training webinar for times during the school day, or do they request the training after school?
Again, that's been both situations. So some Poetry Out Loud functions as as a poetry club that takes place after school, and so that typically would take place during those hours. But many of the teachers use it in their classroom. I would say the majority of teachers we've worked with have used it during the classroom setting.
Thank you, Gary. I have one follow-up question, which is a little bit of an, I guess, ancillary, but I'm curious about the staff at the centers for the adult daycare or elder care facilities. Do you work with staff at all? Is there any involvement between the staff that are there and the students and the teachers that come on site?
So I'm so glad that you asked that, Eleanor. That's actually one of the really cool parts of this program. So we've only focused on the side of Poetry Out Loud and how the students and teachers can work together in the state arts agencies. But I also use a lot of the techniques that Poetry Out Loud uses. For instance, the concept of tone mapping, right? We use that to teach the healthcare workers how to recite poetry as well. So there's a whole other component of Poetry for Life that's teaching the healthcare workers, even family members, to use poetry as well. And that can be interaction with the students and the teachers, can be things that they use on their own. And even with some of the senior centers that we've worked with, we teach the elders a lot of the recitation skills. And as one example, last week in Brooklyn with Brooklyn Tech, we came to an adult daycare center, New York Memory Center, and we used the technique of taking the line of poetry and then adding an emotional tone to it, right? So the tone mapping idea. And the line had something about a smile in it. And so we each went around and said, how can we put a smile in our voice to say the line? And the elders and the students both did that technique. So it really can be broken down in the workshops to sort of the skills that the students are learning to build up anyway. And it was really fun to pass around the smile and saying that line.
Hi, Gary. This is Beth at the NEA again. Just a follow-up question. Have you seen any impact on the staff at the care facilities in terms of their morale, their mood, their effectiveness? I'm sure you're aware of studies in the healthcare system that shows that arts in healthcare settings have had an effect on the nursing staff and other staff in the hospitals. But what have you seen in the care facilities with this program?
So in general, what we see is when the professional caregivers or family caregivers watch the person participate in performing the poems, creating poems, that they see the person as more fully human. And that, of course, has benefits to how they get cared for, because if you're seeing that person as more fully human, you know, the level of care is going to go up. So we've seen that, and that's really highlighted in the study that was published working with the medical students. That's exactly what we looked at. And so we see that across the board. It's pretty dramatic, and I think that's a real underlying benefit from this. It changes the stigma of having memory loss. It changes how we think about aging. The students totally change how they think about aging, which is funny. One of them, after a session, they served popcorn, and she said, "I thought old people only ate mush, and now I know they eat popcorn." So that's kind of a silly example, but it really does change how people perceive aging and memory loss.
Thank you, Gary. I have two more logistical questions. The first is there a fee associated with the training webinars for teachers or for students? And is there a fee associated with program guidance from Poetry for Life?
So I'm happy to say that there is not a fee, that we have funding in place to do this work, and I think that that makes it, you know, easy for people to say yes to, because there's not a charge for it.
Thank you, Gary. I have another question about transportation. So who is responsible for transportation? Does it differ based on the type of group that you're working with? Does Poetry for Life take care of that?
So that is a place where we do ask the schools to contribute. So we do ask that they provide the transportation. And depending on the school, like some of them, you know, they're all older students who drive to school, and so we actually, everybody drove themselves. You know, we went in groups, but we drove ourselves. But many of the schools have transportation systems. They have buses and things, and so we ask that the school contributes that.
I've had some experience with that, and some of the public schools will provide transportation if they know about it earlier. Some of the private schools arrange, they have their own system. Most of them have like little vans that they've transported people, the students, from place to place. And in other instances, parents have brought the high school students to the facilities. Like it was like a field trip, and the parents just came and they brought some of the kids, and that eliminated the fee for the school, and the school didn't have to worry about providing a bus transportation. So there's many ways you can look at that issue, and a lot of it that I've talked through depends on your school, your contact at your school, and who you're working with, that type of thing, but it can be resolved.
Thank you. So I have another follow-up question about SAA involvement. And the question is, once a teacher in a school expresses interest in Poetry for Life, then they're connected directly to Poetry for Life staff. And at that point, is the SAA not as involved anymore? Is that correct?
So again, this is really an individual choice. So it can function that the State Arts Agency helps to make the contact, and that's the level of commitment that they're comfortable with. But of course, we encourage people to be more involved, and I can see people going out and attending the poetry workshops and the field trips especially. So that really depends on the level that people want to be involved at.
Hi, Gary. This is Beth again. I'm getting back to some of the more the larger questions about this approach. You mentioned the benefits of poetry for older adults and those with dementia. What is unique about poetry versus other art forms such as music or dance or visual art? I know that we have we're preaching to the choir here because everybody is very committed to poetry, but in terms of making the case to funders or to other stakeholders, what is unique about poetry in this intergenerational setting?
So one of the things that's so interesting about it, and it does share similarities with music especially, but I think that there's, if we look at sort of history of humankind, right? If we go back and we see, like, how did people keep track of their history, of the local stories before there was written word? And one of the ways that we did that was through oral poetry. So I'm thinking like, going back to Homer or the griot tradition in African cultures. And you have this poet that's keeping track of that. So one of the ideas, and this comes from Jane Hirschfield, a wonderful West Coast poet, and she has this idea that at our core as people, we used poetry as a memory device. We used rhyme and rhythm, and especially, best words in the best order, or, poetic, beautiful language. We used that very early on. And so how does that manifest itself? So if you're working with a person that has memory loss and you say, quote the raven, many people will say nevermore. And so it's this popping in of these things that they've learned, but also, and this really builds on poetry out loud, because there's a power and a beauty in recited, performed poetry. And that is the strength that we tap into. And I think that it shares, dance, there's a strength in dance, visual art. I mean, all the arts work, and there are programs in all of those different arts that work with older adults and work with people with memory loss. But I think that there's something very unique about poetry, and then it's the way that we support it by using our breath to say it has an aerobic benefit. It's the way that we can engage people in performing it together. So, those kind of techniques. And of course, I'm a poet, so I'm really for poetry.
And as another question along those lines, have you experienced any problems in getting into the memory care facilities and the assisted living facilities, and working with them to bring the students in? Any advice from either you or Ginny on working in those facilities?
So generally, they are over the moon when you call up and say, I have a group of students that I want to bring, and we want to come and do poetry with your elders. They're usually really accommodating, and in the webinar I mentioned that we would, part of the thing we can support the teachers with is to give a little script so that they, you're typically going to talk to the activities director. These are the things that you're saying we're going to do, and so they're all set up to have you come. And so it's quite easy to get them to say yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you all so much, and a special thanks to Gary and to Ginny for presenting on Poetry for Life. We don't have any more questions right now, and so I think that this has been really, really helpful for everybody online. We're also going to archive it, so please, if you had colleagues that wanted to attend today and we're not able to due to schedule conflicts, we'll have the archive available. Gary's contact information is up on the screen for you all right now, and he is the best place and person to follow up with. But if there are state arts agency folks on the line who are POL people and they have any questions for me about the program side of this, please don't hesitate, to reach out to us too. I work with Gary and with Steve Young at the Poetry Foundation, so we all are a team and we work together and are really excited about the expansion of Poetry for Life. So thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. We know that you're busy. And we will, again, archive this and we'll send to everyone the link. So thank you all and have a good afternoon.